Bonjour, dnes communication class also known as Chickadee. The name I carry is Thunder Rain Woman. I'm from the Bear Planet, and I very much feel connected to that bear and knowing that spirit of the bear and how it helps me in my day-to-day walk. And I don't know more to me is like a baby. You know, it's only been a couple of months at this. You know, they've been around since November 10th. And we had the opportunity to go and meet the founders of Idle No More back in December. Jerry was one of them. We traveled down to Saskatoon to meet with them and trying to find out more about Idle No More. And I've never been idle. I just want to put that out. I've had a lot of experience. I could call myself a veteran, and in many different movements here in Winnipeg, nationally, internationally. I've been part of a movement called the Native Youth Movement many years ago. Anybody remembers that? It was a group of youth that walked across Canada to get a message across that they wanted their voice heard. I've also been a co-founder of First Nations Environmental Network back in the early 90s. And that was to take a look at the issues around traditional lands and First Nation communities and how they were trying to protect these areas. And I also became involved and not by choice, I was asked to do some of these things. And I just went with the flow of life. And I also became involved with IEN, which is the Indigenous Environmental Network, also in the 90s. So I have experience in working with Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous communities in the area of protection of areas, water, the lands, the trees, you name it. And a lot of time, you know, people are saying, well, what are you making this noise for? You know, what is this all about? And a lot of people are not aware of things that are happening in their own communities, in their backyards, you know, like the mining that's happening at Watt, you know, in northern Quebec, or even the logging that's happening in Ontario. There's a lot of these places that I guess are overlooked by our people because they have a day-to-day struggle of surviving. And it's because of the way that the Indian Act has put things in place, which has kind of made our people think within the perimeters of that reserve. That reserve really is a concentration camp. And they all gave us numbers, like I always say, I'm 1165. And I can't compare it to, you know, the Holocaust or anything, but the Holocaust continues here. You know, our people are dying. There is a genocide that is happening with our people. We are continuously separated from our lands. And even up to a point where Senator Brazeau was here a couple months back, and he was doing an urban and non-urban, I don't know, consultation. I can't remember what exactly it was called. And it was another divide and conquer tactic that I saw. You know, us against the urban natives against the reserve natives. Like they're saying, what's the reserve, you know, doing for you? Well, there's not much the reserve can do, you know, depending on what they also get. And so in a way, it was almost, you know, saying that we had to talk against our reserves where we came from. Yet, you know, there's not much in our reserves as in economics, as in employment. Also, the education is very poor on reserves, you know, compared to mainstream Canada. So we have a lot of these things, and then a lot of people don't understand. You know, like I was sharing with my friend, Joe, who you'll meet here, and I said, we're not stupid anymore, you know, and we laugh about that, you know, and it has nothing to do with Idle No More. It's just the fact that we were occupied. Our minds were occupied with things, with the trauma of residential school, with the addictions that was put upon us, and for us to deal with traumas. So we were occupied about a lot of times not to be aware of our environment and what was happening in our communities and around us. But as soon as we became well, you know, and started the healing process, we became aware that, you know, these things that are impacting us, the devastation of the lands, and especially around the, you know, development and industry, oil, gas, you name it, you know, is impacting us. And if you look at in a lot of the areas that are around First Nations, you'll see a lot of development is there. It's close to the First Nations communities. You talk about the pulp mills, they're close to the reserves, and now you see a lot of sicknesses coming from that itself. So there's many things, you know, over the years that I come to understand. I went to an environmental justice summit in Washington, D.C. A few years back, and my part was to explain, you know, as you heal Mother Earth, and I totally believe that. You know, like when you become aware of yourself, you become aware of your environment, but you also become more connected to the earth, you know, and a life that we once were, I guess, as a community, understanding, and that we all took care of one another, that we took care of the environment, that we took care of the things that were around us. You know, we start to remember those things, you know, and growing up, you know, we had a lot of things to deal with, and I'm not saying, you know, it's not over yet. We still have a lot of things to deal with. You know, and there's still things that we need to heal from. There's still things that we need to do as a people, but we also need to do something as a people, not just Indigenous people. It's also non-Indigenous people. You know, we didn't get to this crisis ourselves. These legislations that were made, these policies that were made, you know, it went back to way back when, before, you know, like when they created the Indian Act. Even before that, they were created those divisions, the divide and conquer amongst, you know, the settlers and ourselves, you know, and that was to get the resources, you know, to get access to the resources in our areas. And so my work, I guess, in Idle No More is like a watchdog, you know. I always tell my friend, I said, I feel like a watchdog. I want to make sure that these things go in a good way, that we're not going to be harmed, or no one's going to get harmed along the way, that we're going to try and work in that unity, you know, because I've been at this for a long time, you know, and like I said, I've worked with many groups. I remember I went to a water summit here years ago in Winnipeg, and